Hello, my name is Peter, and today I'm going to show you how to create a save game file. As you can see here, I have these three doors set up, and what they do is when I walk through them, they will give me a different weapon, which you can see by the changing of the color of the gun. It also shoots different bullets, which I change to have different impulse. But what we're going to do is be able to say, okay, I want my player to save right in this spot with this weapon. So I've created a key, in this case P. You'll see in the top left, it'll say game saved. And then when I leave, normally when you come back without saving, it would start you back at the player start. But when you save it with a save game file, you'll see that I start in the same place with the same weapon. Now if I go over and I say now I want this wooden gun, and I stand over here this time, and we press P to save, and we exit out, and we restart, you'll notice that we're in that same spot with the same weapon. As you notice, I was this time facing the wall. That's just something that I didn't set up. I've only set it up to gather your location and not your rotation, so it always resets your rotation, but we will fix that in this tutorial. So I'm going to quit out of this, and we are going to start up a new tutorial or a project. So you can open up the launcher, the version of the editor your choice. I'll be using 7.6.1 for this. The principles are the same if you decide to use an older one, but the layout for 4.7 is different than 4.6 and lower. So just keep that in mind. We are going to use the first person template, and we're just going to name it Save Game Tutorial 1. I believe I already have a Save Game Tutorial, and we're going to create it. Just bear with me while this loads. Apologize for the wait. It should come up any second now. Alright, and here we go. So as you see, it opened up with the default first person template. And if you haven't messed around with this yet, feel free to play around for a little bit. You start off with a first person character who has a gun, and you click in your mouse, he will shoot a bullet. And as I mentioned before, if you don't save the game, what will happen is if I stand over here and I exit out and then I restart, I'll be back in the default player start. So before we do the save game stuff, let's set up the same uh, weapon switching setup that I had before. So first what we're going to do is we are going to create three different projectiles. We have our default one. As you can see, when you start up the project here in the content browser, you will have different folders. You're going to open up the blueprint folder, and you're going to see the first person projectile. What we're going to do is we're going to right click and we're going to hit duplicate, and we're going to name it first person projectile 2, which is the default name at the moment, and we're going to double click to open it. Now as you see here, we have our event graph. We're actually, just real quick, you don't have to do this, this has nothing to do with the save game. Just to differentiate between the two guns, we're going to just change this to 500. This is just the force that it gives off when it hits an object. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to our viewport, which is here. If you're using 4.6, the viewport, I believe it by default starts in the viewport, but the viewport is somewhere up here in the top right corner. In the viewport, what we're going to do is we're going to click on the yellow sphere, and as on the right, you're going to see materials. You can change it to whatever material you like. It really doesn't matter. What I'm going to use is this wood oak material. I think it looks pretty cool. And all we're going to do is compile, save it, and close it because that's all we need to do for that. And what we're going to do is the same thing we did to make this one. We're going to just duplicate it by right-clicking on the blueprint, hit duplicate. This time we're going to name it First Person Projectile 3. We're going to double click on it to open it. This time we're going to change this little number to 1,000. Again, this is just to change the force of the projectile when it hits an object. We're going to go to our viewport. We're going to click on this time the oak sphere, and we're going to change it again. Use a different material than this one. Again, doesn't matter, it's your preference. I'm going to be using the steel material, and we're just going to compile and save it. We're going to close that out. Now we have our 3 projectiles. Now what we're going to do is we're going to open up the first person character, and we're going to make some edits in here. Now the first thing you're going to see is a lot of already pre-made blueprints in here. We're not going to touch most of this. We're just going to make a few edits to this bottom section where it says spawn projectile. As you can see here, what it will always spawn the first person projectile. Now we have 2 more projectiles that were created, so we're going to have it change projectiles based on what weapon we're carrying. So what we're going to do is on the left hand side here under my blueprint, we're going to hit add new variable, and we're going to name this weapon. Now by default it's a boolean, but we're going to switch this to an integer. Now what I'm going to do is just spread this out because I know that this is going to take up some space. We're not going to touch this play sound at location because all 3 are going to be playing this sound regardless of what weapon we have chosen. What we're going to do is we're going to right click before this spawn actor, and we're going to put a branch. Now what we need to do is from this montage play node, we're going to grab this execution node, and we're going to plug it into the branch. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take our newly created weapon variable that can be found here on the left hand side. We're going to drag it out and grab it. If you didn't know, what I just did is I held control and dragged it out. That will get your getter. If you hold alt and grab it out, that will be your setter. Just a cool tip in case you didn't know that. So with our getter for the weapon, we're going to drag it out, and we're going to hit equal, and we want this first one equal integer, and we're going to grab the red node and plug it into the branch. And what we're going to do is I'll explain a little ahead of what we're doing. We're going to assign each bullet its own weapon number. So the first number will be 0, the second weapon will be 1, and the third weapon will be 2. So what we're going to do is we're just going to check what the number is, and based on that number we are going to spawn a different projectile. And the way this gets changed is, if you remember from the beginning video, we had a bunch of doors set up. Those doors will change the number for us. So what we're going to do is, if our weapon is equal to 0, which is our first weapon, if it's true, we're going to spawn this first projectile. And then it will play the sound at location. If it's not true, we're going to have another branch. We're going to just copy and paste these two things here, the weapon and the equal integer nodes, and we're going to, instead of checking to see if it's equal to 0, we're going to check to see if it's equal to 1. Now if it's equal to 1, we're going to grab this one, this spawn actor first person projectile. We're going to copy, sorry. We're going to copy and paste it. Now if it's true, we're going to change this class this time. This one, we don't want it to spawn the first person projectile, we want it to spawn the first person projectile 2 class. And then from this execution part, we want to plug it into the play sound at location. And we're also going to have to drag this make transform. We're going to drag it into the spawn transform so we know where to spawn the new projectile. And if it's not equal to this case, if it's not equal to 0 or 1, we're going to do one more thing. So we're going to drag this out another branch. And we're going to copy this weapon and equal thing again. Plug it into the branch. Change the equal value to 2. And if it's equal, we're going to spawn another projectile. So we're going to copy and paste this again. And again, you don't have to copy and paste it. This node can be found if you right click on the open space and you hit spawn actor from class. From there you can select your class and we'll do, let's say, first person projectile. And as you see, sometimes hold on, did I do something wrong? Where is our first person projectile 3 class? I'm not going crazy. Okay, yeah, so as I just said, like sometimes it doesn't show up for some reason. I'm not really sure. You can notice here on the bottom it's kind of cut off, but there is a first person projectile of 3. It's there. I'm not sure why that happens, but trust me, it's there. You just have to type it in. Sometimes you have to type in the whole name. Usually you just have to type in the first part and it'll come up. So I'm sorry about that. So what we're going to do is from the branch, if it's true, we're going to spawn the first person projectile 3. We're going to grab this and we're going to put it into the play sound at location. And we're also going to, we have to grab this make transform orange, sorry. We need to grab that and plug it in to make sure that it knows where to spawn the new projectile. So we're just going to compile and save that. Now, right now, it's always going to fire the first projectile because our default for the weapon, as you can see here on the right-hand side, is 0. And we have nothing that's going to change it yet. So it'll always spawn that, and we will change that in a little bit. One more thing that I want to change while I'm in here. Again, this is not necessary for the save game, but I thought it'd be pretty cool. What we're gonna do is we're gonna set up the gun so that it also changes colors. It'll be it'll be easier to see the visual change when we switch weapons. What we're going to do is, and if you excuse me 1 second, I just need a refresher of what I did here. Okay, I'm actually just going to copy this over because this code is the same and I'll just walk you through it. So we're going to just paste this new code and let me just explain. So we have an event tick, and event tick runs every frame. What we're doing is we're just checking the weapon that we have selected. So every frame it's checking that we have, and I mean this is probably not ideal solution to this. There's probably another way. Maybe only do it when we actually walk through our doors, but for the purpose of the tutorial, this is how I have it set up. Um, so what we're doing is we're checking to see what weapon we have selected. If we have weapon 1, the first weapon, or weapon 0, what we're going to do is we're going to set our material, and the material that I used is called End Metal Gold. Again, you don't have to use that material. I try to keep it the same color as the base projectile, which was like an orange color, but you don't have to. I try to match it with the bullet color. So for weapon 1 here, I have it changing to the oak color, which is the same color as our second projectile. And for weapon 2, I have it changing to our steel, which is the same color as our steel projectile. And what that's going to do is it'll also change our gun color when we walk through the doors. Now again, we have nothing that's changing this variable, so you won't see it, but I will just show you. So right now it's blue, and when we start it up, I guess you can see it turn gray. It just means um, the material didn't load. That happened in the other version that I had of this tutorial. I'm not sure why it doesn't load, but it's besides the point. As you see, it did change colors, sort of. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to create our doors. So we're going to, here in the content browser, we're going to go to Add New, Blueprint Class, and we're going to click on Actor. And we're going to name this door, or actually, we're going to name this Power Up Door 1. And it's not really, the name's not really important. You can name it whatever you want. That's what I'm going to name it for this tutorial. So we're going to double click to open it, and it's right now you're going to see a sphere here. That's just by default. That's always going to be there when you start up a new blueprint. If you're using a version from 4.6 or lower, um, you may not have anything in there, but that's alright because the steps are still the same. What we're going to do here is we're going to go to the left and we're going to add a component, and we're going to add a static mesh. You're going to see that ball go away. That's completely fine. We're going to name it door. Now on the right hand side, you're going to see this static mesh. Right now it says none, and that's why I don't see anything. We're going to change this to door frame. You're going to click on that, and there we have our door. What we're going to do now is click on the door, and again, I like to keep the colors for the bullet, the gun, and the door all the same, so we're going to change the material on this from frame, and we're going to change it to, I believe it was gold. So for our first door, again, doesn't matter what material you use. I'm using gold for this one. And we still have a few more things we need to do. So now we need a box collider or a trigger that will say when we walked into this door. So we're going to go to here. We're going to go to, if you scroll down to the bottom here under collision, you'll see box collision. We're going to add that. And I believe the scale that we want from what I did earlier, I believe we want 0.5, 1.25, and 3. And if you bring this up, it should be almost a perfect fit within the door. It's alright if it's not perfect. And again, if you didn't see what I did, I changed the scale up here on the right hand under transform. It's alright if it's not perfect. It's just, all that matters is that when we walk, it's somewhere in the middle of the door so that when we walk through the door, it will activate the blueprint to change our weapon number. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to go to event graph that's here. And again, if you're in 4.6, I believe that's up here next to the viewport button. What we're going to do is from this event begin overlap, what we're going to do is we're going to drag out from this other actor, and we're going to do a cast to first person character. That's the first person player that you start off with, and that has the gun and everything. And what we're going to use this for is basically just going to be our check to see that what overlaps with the door is actually our player character. So for example, we don't want like one of our projectiles to go through the door and that change our weapon. We want to actually walk through the door to change our weapon. So what we're going to do is have this cast, and as the first person character, we are going to set weapon. And now this is where we're changing our weapon. Now this is our first door, so we just wanted to set it to weapon 0. And that's all we need to do for this blueprint. So we can compile and save it. We can close it. Come back to this content browser, and what we're going to do is kind of what we did for the projectiles. We're going to right click on the blueprint. We're going to duplicate, and we're going to say power up door 2. We're going to double click to open it. If you start up on the event graph, we're just going to click on this weapon node that we have here. We're going to change that to 1. Then go to the viewport, click on the door, and change the material to whatever you feel like. I used oak, so I'm going to use oak. Compile and save it, close it, and we're going to do it for one more door. So right click on the blueprint, duplicate, name it power up door 3, and we're just going to click weapon 2 for this weapon node. Go to viewport, click on the door, change it to steel, compile, save it, and we're going to close it. Now that we have our doors, what we can do is we can bring our doors out. So I'm just going to put them in order. So this is power up door 1, power up door 2, power up door 3. It doesn't really matter where you place them. The point is that we're able to walk through. So now if I hit play here, again, my material didn't load, but this should be a gold gun. If I walk through this door, I guess the guns are not loading its materials. I apologize, but you can see our weapon bullet has changed now. So now we have an oak bullet. And if we walk through this door, we have a steel bullet. And then if we walk back through this door, we have our basic orange bullet. But now if you notice, if I leave and I come back, I'm back here with my base orange, and it won't save the weapon that I have. So, well, real quick, what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to reset these. Maybe it will work this time. And again, this is me resetting the materials for the gun. So steel. Then what we're going to just do is compile and save it. Let's just give that one more try. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It's really besides the point of this tutorial. As long as you can see that the bullets are changing color, that's all you need to know. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to say that we want to be able to save our weapon that we have. And while we're at it, we're also going to save our player's location and rotate, or the transform in this case. Last time I only did location, which is why I didn't save its rotation. But we're going to save its transform so that every time we restart, it'll leave off, it'll spawn us where we left off in the world with the weapon that we were carrying. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up our first person character, and there's a few things we're going to do. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to use our event begin play. What we're going to do is when we first start up the game, we're going to check to see if they have a saved game file. So what we're going to do is from event begin play, we're going to drag out and we're going to hit does save game file exist? And we're going to, under slot name, we're going to give it a name. You can name this whatever you want to, but be aware that we have to use this name throughout this code, so make sure it's something simple that we can easily reuse. I'm going to use save game 1. Don't worry about the user index, that's not important because we're not going to be using it. So we're just going to leave it at 0. Now what we're going to do is from the return value, we're going to hit branch, if I can spell. There we go. Branch, and basically this is just checking, do we have a save game file on the computer that has that name save game 1? If we don't, we want to create the file for them. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click and hit create save game object. And what we haven't done yet is we haven't created a save game object. I actually already have one created. So, and I'll show you how to do this. As you notice here now, there's a save game file. Before I messed up my video, so I had to redo it. But I left this file. So what I'm just going to do is we're just going to delete that. Sure. We're just going to delete that, and we're just going to recreate it. So we're going to hit add new blueprint class. And we're not going to use actor this time. What we're going to do is under here, you'll probably see it like this. You want to drop this to all classes down and type in save game. So we're going to click on save game and hit select. And we're going to name this save game file. We're going to double click it to open it. And what we're going to do in here is we're just going to add the variables that we need to save to our character. Like whatever we want to save in our save game file needs to be added in this blueprint. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to add new variable, and we're going to type in player weapon. And we're going to change that to an integer type. And since we're also going to save the transform, we're going to type in player transform, and we're going to change that to a transform type. And that's all we're going to do here. This is just going to hold the variable types. And essentially what we're going to do in our first person character is we are going to basically set these variables from there. So we can close the save game file. For some reason I closed the first person character, so I'm just going to reopen that. Now here we have our create save game object. We're going to hit the drop down here and you'll see the new blueprint that we just created, save game file. So we're going to click on that. Now we're actually going to add 2 more variables. Again, I already have them set up. We have our transform, variable, which is just a variable type transform named transform. And we also have a save game instance, which is going to hold a reference to our save game object that we're creating. That is so that we have an easier way of referencing it, is rather than dragging out from this pin every time we want to use that save game file, we can just use the save game instance that we are creating. And you want it to be a variable type of save game, not save game file as we just created. That will not work. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab the save game instance, we're going to grab the setter, and we're going to just plug this in. And then we have our reference. So from our reference, what we're going to do is we're going to cast to save game file. Oh, something I forgot to mention is that in 4.7 you have these pins in the setter nodes that you can drag out from. In 4.6 and before that, you don't actually have that, so you're just going to have to drag out a getter node as well and then drag it into the cast. This is just something new that they added to 4.7. Okay, so from the cast to save game file, what we're going to do is, since we're setting up the save game file for the first time, we want to give our values a default value to start off with. So what we're going to do is, as our save game file, we're going to get our player weapon, or I'm sorry, we don't want to get, we want to set our player weapon. We want to set these values. So we're going to set our player weapon, and we're going to make it default 0. We're also going to drag out from the save game file, and we're going to hit set player transform. And we're actually going to have to use, we're going to have to create a transform. So we're going to right click and click, or type in create, or actually it might be make transform. Yes, make transform. And the location we're going to use is -633 for 299. This is just, or it's pretty close to the default player start. I just have it memorized for the purpose of this tutorial. You don't have to use that as the default location. You can put that anywhere on your level. This can be, in your game, it can be your spawn point, that when you first start off the level, wherever you want to have the player by default start, this is what you would put in. And we're just going to leave the scale and rotation the same. Now that we have them set, we are just going to, we're just going to leave that the way it is. What now we're going to do is, oh, actually, no, we're not going to leave, because what we need to do is we just set these values, but we didn't actually save our game. We created our game instance, but we have to actually set these values. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag out from the save game file, and we're going to type in save game to slot. Now, this is where that name that we just used before comes in handy. So we use save game 1. So we are going to go and change this slot name to save game 1. And that will be it. That will make sure that we create our save game file when we first start, if they don't have one. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a new custom event. You don't have to do it this way, because what I'm going to do is, from this branch, if it's true, we're going to load the game, and I could put all the code for loading the game up here, but I like to have it in its own custom event because it makes it easier to call the event if you need to use it in other places. it's easy to just use it in to call it from one place as opposed to like repeating the code. So we're going to name this custom event load underscore game. And what we're going to do is for load game, we want to take the values from the save game file and place them into the variables that we have in our first person character. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab an instance, we're going to get the save game instance, and we're going to cast to it. And then from here, what we're going to do is we're going to, this time, we're going to get our player weapon, and we are going to set the weapon that's inside our player. So for example, if our weapon in our save game file was 1, when we load it, it will take that 1 from the save game file and throw it into our current player. And if you remember from before, what we're doing is we check to see what weapon we have, and we change the gun material, and we change which projectile fires. So that will change based off what gets loaded. We're also going to grab from here, we're going to grab our player get player transform, and we are going to set our player's transform within the first person character blueprint. So that will hold the player's location, rotation. Even if you wanted to change the scale, you can change the scale, but we're not going to change the scale on this. And that's all you need to do for loading the game. Because now you've just dragged the variables from the save game file and placed them into our current variables. But what we need to do is we actually have to call this load game event. So what we're going to do is on event begin play, if we do have a save game file, we're going to actually use the values from the save game file. So we're just going to, from the true, we're going to hit load game. And what that's going to do is it's going to call this little set of code here, and that will set our weapon and our transform. The last thing we need to do is we need well, two things. We're going to do one more for save game and one more for clear game. So here we're going to do another save game. So we're going to do add custom event, and this time we're going to name it save underscore game. What we want to do here is we're just going to use this save game instance since it's already in the place. We are going to cast to our save game file again. Excuse me. And this time what we want to do is we want to take the values from our player character or first person character, and we want to store them in the save game file. So what we need to do is here we want to set our player weapon, and we want to use the weapon that we have in our first person character. We also want to drag out from the save game file, we want to set player transform, and we want to grab the transform that we have in our player first person character. And now what we want to do, the last thing, is we want to make sure that we actually save the file. Again, just because you set it, you actually have to save it, otherwise it won't put it into the save game file. So we're going to save game to slot. And we are going to put save game 1. Now, I just remembered that I did something wrong with the load game. So we don't want to just grab our instance. What we want to do is we want to load game from slot. Apologize for not remembering this. This is actually a huge part. If we don't do this, this won't actually work. Um, Sorry. So what we want to do is here in the slot name, we want to hit save game 1. That's the name of our thing. So we're going to load our game, and we'll always have this because we make sure that the first time you play, we create one save game file, and then the second time we're actually going to load. So we're going to load this in, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to use this node. I believe you can use both, but we're going to use this just to be safe. So this is just going to use the game that we loaded. We're going to cast to it, and then we're going to do our loading. So we're just going to take the values from the save game file and place it into there. Again, I apologize for this little mistake, but that should fix that. So we also have our save game, and to save it, we're just going to do is, or actually, sorry, after we save it, we're just going to we're going to make a print statement that says game saved. And after we load a game, we're going to do another print statement, which is just the print string node. And in the string, we're going to just put game loaded. The last thing we want to do is we're going to create a custom event again. So add custom event. We're going to name this clear underscore game. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a node. We're gonna go out from here, and we're gonna get actually we're gonna get a reference to our save game file. We're gonna cast to it. And then from the save game file, what we want to do is we want to set our player weapon, and we're just going to set them back to the default. We're kind of just going to do the same thing we did when we created it. We're just going to reset our values to the default ones, and then we're going to save it over. So basically it's just resetting all the values. So we're still going to have the same game file, so we don't ever have to create a new one. We're just going to all the data that we did save, we're just going to bring it back to its default. Um, so actually I just copied and paste that over. Sorry if this is a little messy right now. So from the save game file, we want to connect these pins here. There's 3 pins. They need to go into all 3. We're going to use the same make transform that we did earlier. We're going to save it to our slot name save game 1. Now we have a clear game. And what we're actually just going to do is we're not actually calling these anywhere. So we're going to create buttons to call them. So you can use any button if you want. If you have a certain controller on that you want to use, you can use it. We're going to use P to call it. And we're going to, from pressed, we're going to call save game. And from M, I know these are random, it's just some random letters. We're going to hit clear game. Not that. Oh, actually, what we're going to do is kind of the same thing. We're just going to add a print statement. This is just to debug, make sure that what we're doing is actually working. So, game cleared. And once we've done that, I believe we are done with our save game stuff. So we can compile, save, go back into the map. So what should happen is we should start here in our default player start with our orange ball weapon, and if it decides to load, our gold gun. And what it's going to do is it's going to create a save game file for us with its default start and the default weapon. Then if we walk through these power-up doors and change our weapon, stand somewhere else, save the game by pressing P, and exit out and restart, will be where we left off. So let's just give that a shot. You see we have our orange ball weapon. We start in the default start. We're going to walk through the oak door. We have our, again, the material for the gun's not working, so I apologize. But we have our oak balls, or projectiles. And we're just going to stand over here. We're going to press P, and you're going to see in the top left it says game saved. Then we're going to hit escape to stop it. And if we play, it actually did not work. So let's just go through this and see what happened. So let's just go through the steps again. It's creating the save game object. We have our defaults. What we did is we saved, so we grabbed our save game instance. Oh, wow, that was, I realized what we did. So we are saving the value, but we're never actually using, we're using the player weapon, but we're never actually using the player transform. And that's kind of important. So what we want to do is, on event begin play, after we load, we're actually going to set the player, or set actor transform. This is kind of an important part, otherwise, I mean, it's probably working, it's just not, we just weren't using it. So we're going to grab the transform from our first person character, and we're going to use that to set the actor transform. We're going to compile, save it. Now this time, if we play it, let's, I think I've started in the wrong spot. This video is going pretty badly, so I apologize. What did we do? So we want to go, we're going to load the game, and then we're going to set the actor transform. Let's just make sure that the numbers I was using were correct. So, 631 for 229. I don't think that's going to fix the issue, but we're just going to switch the Z. Okay, I'm going to pause the video and bear with me. I will fix this and I'll come back and let you know. Okay, so I am back and I figured out a few issues, which is why it wasn't working. Unfortunately, I realized that for some reason the rotation doesn't save, but the location and the gun still save. So, well, at least we know that it is working. So what my issue was, and you won't have this issue, if you followed this for the first time, is I already had a file called save game 1, so I actually had to change it to save game 2. Because what was happening was, it was here, as I remember, we said we're going to check to see if the game save file exists, and if we do, we're going to set the instance here. Since I already had it, this was never getting set, and none of the saving was working. Another issue that this is something that you will have to add in our save game where we were setting the player transform to transform. That's actually not what we want. What we want to do is we want to grab the current transform where the player is. So you're gonna right click. I'll just delete this to show you. You're gonna right click and you hit get actor transform, and you're just gonna plug that in, and that will hold the transform of the player. Again, I'm not sure why the rotation doesn't save, but the location itself does save. And the last thing we need to add is what we weren't doing is before. I believe what we had was in our load game, we had it loading from game slot and then casting straight to it. That's not what we want to do. What we want to do is we actually have to set the game instance. So for example, what we're doing here, so we're going to grab a setter for this game instance and we're going to set it, and then we're going to cast using that. What this will do is when you start up a game, your save game instance, it'll hold those two values that we created, the weapon and the player transform, but they will be at its default value because we never actually set it. So what we're doing is we're setting the game instance, and then from there we're just going to reset those values to what we have. You need to have this instance set in order for this to work. If you don't, you won't be able to save it, because if you don't set it, when it gets to here, when you're casting, the cast is going to fail because this is not referencing anything. So you have to make sure you have a reference to that save game file. And after that, I believe everything should work. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and play it. Now you're going to see me start off in a random location with the silver gun, or silver bullet. I'm going to press M to clear game. You'll see it on top left, it'll say game cleared. I'm going to escape, press play again, and I'll start at the beginning with my yellow bullets. I'm going to walk over here. I got my oak bullets. I'm going to stand here. And actually, what's going to happen is when I restart this, it's going to flip me this way because of the rotations not being saved. But we're going to press P to save. We're going to restart. See, we have that, saving our location and our weapon. We can go in here, walk over here, we're going to save it again, quit, save our location and our weapon, and I'll just show you. Right now we have the oak. I'm going to actually clear the game with M, so the game's going to be cleared, and then when I restart, I'll be at the default start with the weapon. So that should wrap up the save game file. I'll just quickly go through it one more time to explain how it works. When we begin play, we're going to check for a save game file with a certain name. If we don't have it, we're going to create a file with the save game class that we created here, which holds our two variables. We're going to create an instance of the save game file, which the variable type save game, and this will hold a reference to our save game file. Then we're going to cast to it, and we're going to set these values within the save game file to defaults, which I have the current player start and player weapon equals 0, which is the orange, or yellow orange projectile. And then we have to actually save the game to the slot using the same save game name. If you don't save the game, it won't actually add it to the save game file. Then what it will do every time after, it will check and say, oh, we have save game too. So it will go to the true part of this branch. It will load the game, which is a custom event that we created, and we're going to set the actor transform to the transform that we have saved. And that will be loaded in with our load game event. In our load game event, we're going to load from the game slot using the same name, set our game instance when we load. Then we're going to cast to the save game file, and using the variables from the save game file, we're going to load them into our current first person character. And then we just print a string to make sure it works. When we save the game, we're going to grab our save game instance, which will have a reference ready because when we load it, we are setting the instance here. We're going to cast to it, and we're going to set the values inside the save game file with the values that we have for our first person character. So we're going to grab our weapon variable, and we're going to set it to the player weapon variable inside the save game file. And we're going to grab our current transform and set it to the player transform variable in the save game file. And we're going to actually save the variables to the save game slot. And then we have a print string just to debug it, make sure it works. And then for clear game, we're going to grab our save game instance. Again, we'll have the reference because loading is the first thing that happens. We're going to cast to it, and we're just going to reset the values inside of the save game file to their defaults. As you see here, I have created a transform as a default position, which is the same as the player start in this template. We're going to save the game to the slot and just print a string, and then we just have two button presses, one to save the game, one to clear the game. And that is the gist of it. Again, a save game file can be used to hold any sorts of variables. You can have two variables over here. You can have 200. In another game that I created, I had a save game file with about 20 different variables that I was saving, and that actually makes this very, I wouldn't say messy, but it makes it very long because you have to, every time you save it, what I do is I like to save all the variables that I add at the same time. So um, my code for my other game is just super long here, but it works the same exact way as this, and if you follow these steps, you will be able to save games for your or have a save game file for your game. So thanks for watching, and I hope you've learned a little bit about how to save a game.